My name is Casey, and everything I had ever fought for was born in a cramped one-bedroom apartment. It was a place defined by its broken stove, a faucet that dripped a constant, maddening rhythm, and textbooks stacked higher than any piece of furniture we owned. I was the first in my family to ever see the inside of a university, a reality that left me drowning in student loans. To survive, I juggled 3 lives, one as a student, another as a barista pouring coffee for people who never made their own, and a third as a tutor for rich kids who had drivers waiting for them. Every other moment was spent begging my exhausted body not to collapse. But I held on. I had to. My final thesis was due in 3 days. It was more than a paper. It was my escape plan. It was my ticket out of a life I was never supposed to leave. I still lived with my parents because affording rent alone was a dream I couldn't entertain. They made sure I felt the weight of my presence every single day. "You're 24, still here, still sucking us dry like a damn parasite," my dad would snarl, shirtless and reeking of cheap beer in the living room, often punctuating his words by tossing an empty can against the wall just behind my head. "Don't worry, Daddy," my sister, Savannah, would chime in with the sickeningly sweet baby voice she reserved for him. "Once Casey fails that little essay of hers, maybe she'll finally learn how to clean floors for a living like a normal person." Savannah had dropped out of high school twice and gotten pregnant at 17. Every time she hit a new low, my parents treated it like a celebration, rolling out a red carpet for her failures and calling them blessings. When she needed transportation, she got a car, I got a bus pass. When she was expecting, she got a lavish baby shower, I got lectures about being too selfish to give them grandchildren. And now, as I stood on the very edge of graduating at the top of my class in biomedical engineering, the hatred in that tiny apartment had become a thick, suffocating smoke. It clung to my clothes and my skin. They didn't want me to succeed. They couldn't stand the thought of it. For weeks, I had guarded my laptop as if it were a newborn baby. It held 5 years of my life, lecture notes, complex diagrams, 3D renderings, and the frantic brainstorms from countless sleepless nights. Most importantly, it held my final thesis. The project was about creating prosthetic spinal columns for people in rural communities who had no access to surgeons. It was groundbreaking. My advisor said it had the potential to change thousands of lives. But none of that mattered in our kitchen. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" Dad sneered one night. He leaned against the counter, his shirt stained with grease from dinner, his eyes fixed on my laptop, which was charging on the kitchen table. He took a step towards it. I moved instantly, placing myself between him and my entire future. "Leave it alone," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm almost done." His hand shot out, not to slap me, but to shove me. The force sent me stumbling backward, my shoulder cracking hard against a cabinet. From the doorway, Savannah laughed. She was holding her phone up, the screen lit as if she were recording the whole thing. "Daddy, maybe she should use a pencil and paper like they did in the olden days. Trash like her shouldn't be allowed to have nice tech." "I should have tossed her out the day she was born," he muttered under his breath, turning back to his beer. Never even cried, just stared at everyone like a little leech, sucking the life out of the room with her silence. I pulled myself up. My shoulder ached. I grabbed my laptop, held it tight to my chest, and walked away without another word. 3 more days, I whispered to the empty hallway. Just 3 more days. The next evening, I dragged myself home from my shift at the coffee shop. My stomach was empty, my back ached, and my wrists were sore from a full day of making lattes. The house was strangely dark and silent, except for a single light glowing from the living room. A cold dread crawled up my spine as I stepped inside. Savannah was sitting on the couch, a smug look on her face. My dad was standing behind her, his arms crossed. And on the floor between them was my laptop, or what was left of it. It was shattered. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks, the plastic casing was dented and twisted, and the hard drive was visibly knocked loose from its housing. I fell to my knees, the breath knocked out of me. "I told you," Dad said, his voice flat and cold. "This house doesn't serve leeches, and leeches don't get to have futures." I slowly looked up at him, my mouth too dry to speak. "Why?" I managed to choke out. He actually grinned, as if it were all a hilarious joke. "Because you got cocky. You thought you could just fly away from this family. Well, guess what? We keep our own on the ground." Savannah leaned forward, her smile widening. "Oops," she said, dripping with fake sympathy. "Looks like Miss Perfect doesn't have anything to turn in now. Should have saved it to the cloud, genius." I didn't scream. I didn't burst into tears. I just sat there on the floor listening to the sound of my own breath shuddering in my chest. In that moment, I saw two paths ahead of me. One was to let them break me completely. The other was to build something far stronger from the ashes they had created. But I wasn't ready to choose just yet. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. My arms shook as I bent down and carefully picked up the broken pieces of my laptop. I didn't say a word, not a single curse, not a single sob, nothing. My silence seemed to make Savannah nervous. She wanted a reaction, a performance. "Oh, come on. Don't go all quiet on us now. Stop being such a drama queen. It's not like you're even bleeding." That's when I looked up and smiled. It was a real smile, the first one in weeks, and it terrified her, because I knew something she didn't. My project, my thesis, my future, it didn't live in that broken machine anymore. It lived inside my head. It was in every sketch I had memorized, in every calculation I had tattooed onto my brain during those long, sleepless nights. I could rebuild it. But I wouldn't just rebuild my project. I would rebuild my entire life. And they would spend the rest of theirs regretting they ever laid a hand on me. The next morning, I left the house without a word. I wasn't scared. I was focused. I needed silence to plan my next move. They probably thought I'd run crying to a professor, begging for an extension. They probably expected me to have a breakdown, just like Savannah used to do when she didn't make the cheerleading squad. Instead, I walked directly to the university's lab building. My knuckles were bruised from gathering the sharp fragments of my thesis, but I had more than they could ever know. I had backups, small pieces saved on the university's simulation drive. It wasn't the complete draft, but it was the skeleton, the core blueprints for the spinal prototype, the foundational data. It was enough. Dr. Ellis, my advisor, looked up from her desk when I walked into her office. Her eyes narrowed as she saw the dark bruise forming on my temple where the laptop had hit me. Her expression fell. "Oh my God, Casey, what happened to you?"
I just shook my head, pushing the incident aside. "I just need 24/7 access to the lab for the rest of the week," I said, my voice steady. "I'm rewriting my thesis." She stared at me for a long, silent moment, reading the determination in my eyes. "You have 72 hours left, Casey." "That's more than enough time," I lied. For the next 2 days, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I lived in that lab. Fueled by vending machine coffee and sheer will, I rebuilt everything from memory. I worked on the structural physics, the medical applications, the complex visual simulations. I didn't just rewrite my original thesis. I made it better. I found flaws in my old designs and corrected them, adding new efficiencies I hadn't thought of before. By the third day, my hands were numb from coding, and my hair was a tangled mess. But I clicked the submit button with minutes to spare. Then, I slid down under the main console desk, curled up on the cold floor, and slept for 6 straight hours. When I woke up, my phone had 24 missed calls. all from Savannah and 2 from my dad. I ignored them all. I walked out of the lab and straight to the cheapest motel I could find downtown. My body ached, my eyes throbbed, but I had done it. Then came the presentation day. I walked into the auditorium where students defended their work in front of a panel of professors, renowned doctors, and experts from the medical industry. The other students were dressed in sharp suits and polished shoes. I was wearing a black sweater with small holes in the sleeves and my oldest pair of scuffed shoes. My voice cracked a little when I introduced myself. But when I clicked to my first slide, everything changed. I wasn't just presenting a project, I was telling a story. I explained how prosthetic spinal columns were a luxury the poor and rural communities could never afford. I walked them through the polymer materials, the adjustable hinge mechanics, the incredible cost efficiency of my design. I showed them animations and data projections. I ended with my most important slide, a drawing I had scribbled on a napkin at 2 a.m. in my motel room, which I later digitized. It was a simple drawing of a little girl, stick figure thin, standing tall and straight in a hospital hallway wearing a paper gown and the mechanical brace I had designed down her back. The room was completely silent. Then one person started clapping, and soon the entire auditorium erupted in applause. I didn't just pass, I won the dean's thesis honor. My name was added to a prestigious research fellowship board. I still didn't go home, not for 3 more days. When I finally walked back into that house, Savannah was in the kitchen, her arms crossed and her eyes red. Her phone was shaking in her hand. "You made me look like a complete joke," she screamed. I just blinked at her. "What are you talking about?" She shoved her phone in my face. The screen showed a university social media post announcing my award, filled with comments. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have all my friends tagging me in this? Your sister's a genius. OMG, we stan Casey. What the hell do you think that makes me look like?" "Unemployed," I said. She lunged for me, but I took a deliberate step back. "Touch me," I whispered, my voice dangerously calm, "and I'll have you arrested." That stopped her cold, not because she thought I would actually do it, but because she had never heard me speak with such authority. Just then, Dad stormed into the room. "Where the hell have you been?" he roared. I turned slowly to face him. "Winning," I said. He scoffed, his face turning a blotchy red. "This house doesn't care about your stupid trophies. You still live here, you're still breathing our air and eating our food." That was my cue. I reached into my bag and handed him a single white envelope. He tore it open. Inside was a check for $10,000. "What's this?" he barked. "Rent. For the last 2 years. I adjusted for utilities, and taxes are included. I calculated your grocery spending too." He stared at the check, then at me, as if I had suddenly started speaking in a foreign language. "And now," I continued, "you will never again say that I owe you a single thing." I walked over to the closet and grabbed my old coat. My mother finally peeked out from the hallway. She had been silent the whole time, as always, watching the cruelty unfold as if she weren't a part of it. "I got a job offer," I told the room. 6 figures, medical design firm, full benefits. "Where?" Savannah spat, her voice filled with venom. I smiled. "Across the country." "Wait," my dad started, but I didn't wait. I walked out the front door, got into the waiting cab, and as we pulled away from the curb, I saw Savannah slam the door so hard the frame shook. I saw my dad kick over a chair, like a toddler throwing a tantrum after losing his favorite toy. But it wasn't over. 3 weeks later, I sent them one last thing. A small brown package with "From your leech" written on the label in thick black marker. Inside was my first published medical journal, featuring my prototype, which was now under full research funding. Taped to the cover was a sticky note with a simple message: "You smashed my future, so I built another one." They never responded. Of course they didn't. People like them, people who feed on your weakness and choke on your strength, they never know what to do when you finally rise. They just wait for you to fail, for you to come crawling back with another apology, another "please." But that day never came. 6 months went by. One morning, as I was drinking black coffee in my new apartment, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of an actual city, not the stained ceiling of that house, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification pinged. It was Savannah. Her voice was shrill and breathless. "Casey, Dad lost his job. Mom's sick. I mean, actually sick this time, not faking it for drama. I know we weren't great to you, okay? But you have to come back. We need you. Please just call me back." I listened to the message one more time. Then I deleted it. A week later, I received an email from my old high school. A teacher who had once dismissed me as too distracted wanted me to be the keynote speaker for the school's Women in STEM Day. My first instinct was to decline, but something told me this was the final chapter. This was part of it. I arrived wearing a simple black dress, holding nothing but a flash drive. They called me Dr. Casey Monroe. Now, not the weird girl, not the girl who asked too many questions, not the one whose family never showed up for anything. As I stepped onto the stage in the gymnasium, my eyes scanned the audience and locked onto the second row. There they were. My mom, Savannah, and even my dad. I hadn't told them I was coming. Someone must have seen the flyer, or maybe Savannah still had a Google alert set for my name, the way you track a ghost you hope never comes back to haunt you. My mom looked older, her hair grayer. Dad had gained weight but seemed smaller, diminished. And Savannah, she just looked hollow, as if she'd finally run out of people to feel superior to. I didn't flinch. I began my speech. "Good morning. My name is Dr. Casey Monroe. When I was 17, I was told I wasn't built for brilliance. I was told that my creativity made me unfocused, that asking questions made me difficult, and that standing out made me less." I paused, my gaze sweeping past my family and focusing on the young girls in the crowd. What they didn't tell me was that those very things were my power, that the people who try to make you feel small are usually the ones who are terrified of what you'll become when you realize how big you are. A wave of applause filled the gym. Savannah shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Dad scratched the back of his neck. I continued. While I was preparing my final thesis, a project that was my entire future, someone destroyed it, physically smashed it. They tried to convince me that I would never make it out, that my dreams were disposable. My voice remained even. I rebuilt it in 72 hours, not because I'm special, but because I was finally done letting other people write my ending for me. I didn't have to say their names. They knew. After my speech, I shook hands and took photos with aspiring young scientists. When I finally left the building, my family was waiting by the parking lot. "Casey, honey, can you please talk?" my mother began. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my mother. I saw a woman who stood by and watched her daughter be treated like garbage because it made her favorite child feel a little bit better about herself. "No," I said simply. Dad stepped forward. "We were wrong," he grumbled, "but families are supposed to fix things." I stared at him, then reached into my pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. I handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked, frowning. "My new patent. It's going into production next year. I want you to see what it looks like when a leech builds a future that's worth more than yours ever was." His hand trembled as he held it. I turned to leave. "I'm sorry," Savannah called out, her voice breaking. "Okay? I was jealous. I still am. You became everything I never could." I didn't stop walking. I just whispered over my shoulder, loud enough for them to hear. "You had my parents. You had the house. You had their lies. And I still won." That night, back in my apartment, I lit a single candle. There was no victory party, no revenge-fueled blog post. There was just peace. True revenge wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about knowing they would spend the rest of their lives being haunted by the memory of the day I stopped begging for their approval and started building my own world. The day the leech they tried to starve finally became the cure.